Hey guys, welcome to the channel. So it has come time on the 30-year-old Honda XR250L to change oil. So the first thing you want to do when you change oil on any bike is go ahead and warm it up first, and that will make the oil thinner and it will drain out a lot easier. So what we're going to need for this is a 12mm socket to take the drain plug out of the bottom of the engine, and a 8mm socket to take the oil filter cover off right here. We need an oil filter, and we need 1.7 US quarts of oil. This is GN4 10W30. Honda oil is pretty much what I use in all my bikes. So we're going to go ahead and take the plug out of the bottom of this, drain the oil, take this side cover off, take the filter out and change it. Let's get started. Now I have already warmed this bike up, so it's ready to drain. So pretty much what we have is straight under the bottom of this bike, we have a 12mm bolt, and that is your oil drain. 12mm socket with a short extension works pretty good for this. Now this bike has 1,800 miles on it and has never had the oil changed yet. So it's actually pretty black, and this oil is 30 years old, so definitely needs to be changed on this bike. I'll let this drain out, and then I'll tilt the bike up straight, make sure all the oil has drained out before we put the plug back in. These oil plugs do have a crush washer on them, and sometimes they need replaced. Most of the time they do not. I've hardly ever replaced any of these on a motorcycle, but they last a long time. As long as they don't look damaged, should be just good. It's just like soft aluminum. So I have this measuring cup right here. This is where we'll put the oil back in. So we'll put 1 quart, and then we'll put 0.7 quart. That should be enough to fill this up to the right amount. So while that's draining there, I should be able to take this off to get to the oil filter. Have to remove the bolts. So we'll just rock this back and forth and pull it out. You're going to get oil on the side of the motor, which is fine. Just have to wash it off. You can see how black this oil is and how nasty this filter is. I'm getting oil everywhere. That is pretty darn black, pretty nasty stuff. Don't forget that you have a spring in here. Don't lose that. You can pretty much wipe the oil out of the inside of this to get any of that old nasty oil out of the inside of the oil filter housing. And I need to wipe it off the engine where it spilled down. There's a small O-ring right here. Be sure not to lose it or displace it. It's actually stuck to here, so I'm going to leave it on there. There's also an O-ring here. You can actually get those O-rings and replace those if need be. I just don't have one at the time, and usually they're just fine, but I would recommend replacing that O-ring anyway. I just happened at the time, I don't have one, so we're going to just clean this out. Make sure we got all the old nasty oil out there. Being careful not to lose that O-ring off of here. The O-ring usually sits in this groove right here, but it come off and it's still stuck to this cover, so I'm actually just going to leave it there so I don't lose it. Okay, so I have all this wiped out. I'm going to make sure you put the oil filter in the correct direction, which is the rubber part goes in to the cover, and then set the spring back into the notch inside the housing, and hopefully the spring stays in there. You definitely don't want it falling down while you're doing this. Be real careful. Set the filter back in place. I want to hold this in place so I don't lose my O-rings. I actually was going to go ahead and replace them O-rings because they're so old, but I checked with the Honda shop. They don't have any in stock, so I believe these will be all right. They don't feel dried out or anything. So as long as we're not leaking oil, we know we're good. Just run these all in evenly. Now if we're leaking oil, then we know we're going to have to get O-rings, but I seriously doubt that it will. Now you could actually look up the torque specs and torque these to specs, but I've done so many of them that I kind of got it figured out about how tight to put them. So I don't usually use a torque wrench on this, like so. Now that our oil is totally drained, we'll stand the bike up straight, make sure there's no more comes out, and it don't. So we can go ahead and make sure you get the crush washer on here and put the plug back in the bottom. And the same way with this, you can actually look up the torque specs and torque that to specs if you want. Now we should be able to just add the oil in here. I got a little bit of oil here I want to wipe out. Make sure there's no oil on the engine anywhere. So go ahead and take this filler cap out. I'll go ahead and clean it off. Make sure the O-ring stays on here too. Make sure there's no dirt around the hole. Go ahead and put my hose on here. And the cool part about this is you can just have your oil in it, turn this on, and then your oil dumps out into the engine. Take this cap off right here. All right, so I'll go ahead and pour in 1 quart. And as I said, this holds 1.7 quart, like so. Be careful not to spill it. I could have done a half a quart at a time, actually. Might have been a little easier, but we can handle it. Turn this to let it run in. There we go. I sped the camera up there a little bit. Now we'll go ahead and put in the 0.7, which is about 22.4 ounces, I believe. Is 0.7, so we'll go a little over 20 here, and then we can always check it. Okay, now before we check it, I want to go ahead and start the engine so it circulates through the filter and fills up the filter housing. Then we can turn it off, hold the bike up straight, and check it. Okay, now we can remove this and check it to make sure where we're at. Should be just about perfect. And the way it should be on this stick is between the 2 marks. I like it toward the top of the mark. We'll hold the bike up straight. Now when you check it, you don't screw this in. You just set it down in there, check it. Look at that. Just almost to the mark. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and just put this back in and we're done. It was that simple to change the oil on a Honda XR250L. Pretty much this is basically the same way you do it on Honda CRF250L, CRF300L. Not much difference. Okay guys, that was the oil change for my video series on the 30-year-old Honda XR250L. I'm totally restoring this bike to as close as I can get to new. I'm going to replace the chain next. I've already done the brake fluids, front and rear, cleaned the carburetor. Now the oil change is done. This thing is actually really good. It runs pretty good. So now I can actually take it out for a ride after I've changed this oil. I didn't want to do that before I changed oil, but I can now. So thank you all for watching. Click the thumbs up, subscribe down below, and we'll catch you on the next video. Right on.